elders are the most obedient followers. Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
you are actually worthless if you're a man in that organization and you're not an elder or ministerial servant.
Ultimately, that started to affect your mental health.
To get to the point of suicide, you have to be so low. I had to convince myself that everybody would be better off without me because it wasn't about just stopping my pain. It was about, I don't want to be part of this problem anymore.
They really discouraged self-expression and really limited our creativity.
Where it does get you is one is time. But at some point, I just said, I'm done with all this creative limitation stuff. I have time for it. And that's all I really lacked before, really, was the time.
You left the organization in your 50s. Would you say that time is still an issue for you?
So,
A musician, author, and life coach who believes that life is all about learning and growth. After decades in the Jehovah's Witness organization, Gary found himself starting over in his 50s, rebuilding his life from the ground up through creativity. Since 2017, he's written 4 books, a stage play, short stories, screenplays, and a radio play. So you mentioned you were recruited in the organization at a very young age, right? I think you
right,
mentioned 15 years old. You
right,
were the only one in your household that became a Jehovah's Witness.
correct.
Eventually, you served as an elder. You made your way up to the ranks. You were even in Bethel for some time in your 20s. So could you just share what did life look like for you inside the organization during those years as a brother?
It was mostly good because, as you correctly said, I was not raised. I wasn't indoctrinated from a very early age. I knew what the world was about, but I didn't really like the world anymore. It just like the Vietnam War was raging and all these different things where I was looking for answers, you know. So I thought I found them when I started studying with my best friend. But I have mostly pleasant memories. I would say like the farther along we went, like getting toward the time when I was an elder, it started to get more and more difficult, problematic, and I started to see things I didn't think I'd ever see.
Yeah, you mentioned that you actually ended up stepping down as an elder,
Right.
and that resulted in your self-worth being shattered.
Because they have a way I always say elders are the greatest followers of all people in our organization. It's expected that if you're a man, this is what you should do. You should be an elder. You should be a ministerial servant. That's expected. But even that was not really what really bothered me because I kind of knew better than that. I knew that if I can't do it for now, eventually I'll get back to it. But I lost the ability to get back to it and even the desire to get back to it because of the way they treated me from that day forward. And it was a special kind of torture that they put people through who are men and therefore are supposed to do these things. Therefore, you have to do everything we say to get there. And what if I can't or don't want to? You know, and that's what a lot of guys go through is that they either feel they're either told they're unqualified and they can't figure out why, or they feel unqualified, or they just don't want to do it, which is their business. But you know what? In any three of those scenarios, you are actually worthless if you're a man in that organization and you're not an elder or ministerial servant. Absolutely worthless.
The organization's expectation, it's tied so much to our self-worth and our sense of
Mm-hmm.
self.
Yeah, I mean it's and that you make a good point that they create that feeling of lack of self-worth, especially if you're not doing what they want you to do, and they use that. It's a weapon that they use. It's a control mechanism. So they do it with everybody. They do it with the sister that wants to pioneer,
Mhm.
and that's all she can do in the organization is pioneer. She doesn't actually have a voice. You know, they do it with kids. They do it, within everybody in a different way. So it's not like I'm saying it's oh poor me. I was a man and this happened to me. Any more that I would say oh you poor woman, why did this happen
Mm,
to you? It's just what happens to everybody in some different way.
different way. Yep.
It's just different.
I used to have this perception that men had it better because at least they were able to climb up the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a woman, the most you can do is really just pioneer unless you're married to an elder or someone with status, then you can really be exposed to more things. But it sounds like both genders, they really have it tough in different ways.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for a woman, well, first of all, maybe a woman doesn't want to be an elder. I mean, that's her right. Maybe a man doesn't want to be an elder. That's his right too. So for a woman, it might be that, well, I want to have more of a voice at least. I don't have to be an elder, but I don't see why I can't say a prayer at the dinner table
Yeah.
just because my son's baptized. There's stuff like
Yeah.
that. So those are difficult things for her.
Like I was gonna say, for a woman, it creates a lot of limiting beliefs for us.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
exactly.
can't be in some level of authority. It really puts us in a smaller box than a man.
Right.
So you were an elder, and then you stepped down as an elder, and then that's when a lot of the mental health stuff started to happen because of how they were treating you.
Yeah.
right? Your
That was
close
like
friends.
mid to late 90s. Yeah.
Ultimately, that started to affect your association with the friends, your marriage, and with your kids, and then that compounded your mental health
Right.
negatively
Right.
to the point where you wanted to attempt suicide.
To get to the point of suicide, you have to have some pretty irrational thoughts. You have to be so low that like nothing positive even makes sense to you. So I was sure I had to convince myself that everybody would be better off without me because it wasn't about just stopping my pain. It was about I don't want to be part of this problem anymore. And I really thought that everybody would be better off without me. The last ones that I had to convince myself was my three kids who were, I don't know, like tweens to maybe early teens or something at that point. I forget really. But because I don't remember what year this was, but I actually and I don't remember how I did this. I really don't. But I finally said, this is like the last link in the chain that I've got to take care of, you know. And I somehow rationalized to where I thought, yeah, the kids actually will be fine. Maybe they won't be better without me, but they'll be fine. It's okay, you know, it'll be a temporary thing. I don't know. I really don't even know how I came to that rationalization, but I did. And so when all these people were at the hospital by my side, I thought, wow, I guess I do have an effect on people. I guess that it would be bad if I left this planet, you know. Um, but especially because my parents and my birth family were there in a limited way because the elders, I didn't know this, but the elders are actually controlling who can go into the room to see me. And so my parents were like, "What do you mean we can't see him yet?" Well, there's just too many people. Okay, we get that, but like, why aren't we on the fast track? You know. So it was everybody. Everybody. It made me realize that it actually does matter the fact that I'm still here, and if it did leave somehow, it actually would hurt people, and I don't want to hurt people. That's my bottom line is I don't want to hurt people. I mean, when I thought about how to do the suicide thing, there were times when I'd be driving the car and I'd say, man, what prevents me from just turning the car into the oncoming lane and hitting that Mack truck? Well, it would make a really bad mess. A lot of people would be inconvenienced. There'd be a big mess to clean up. The driver of the truck would be in trouble. He might get hurt. So no, I don't want to do this. I didn't care what happened to me. I just didn't want to make a mess, you know. So I figured out something that would, basically what I did was I did the carbon monoxide thing in the garage.
Now, you were in the organization since you were a young teenager. And it
Hmm.
sounds like you've always had this creative spark in you, but the organization, they really discourage self-expression and really limited our creativity. Looking back, Gary, how did that shape the way you saw yourself and your talents when you were in the organization?
I didn't let it shape what I thought about myself because I know what my abilities are. I'm not bragging about it, and I'm not going to be ashamed of it, you know. But where it does get you is in a couple of ways. One is time. So there was a lot of time there that I really hardly played music at all. All right, I'm raising a family. Okay, great. But also, and I'm working full time, 40 hours a week. But also, you got all these meetings in the service and everything. And but again, it's my choice to do that stuff. I'm not blaming anybody. But when you really get down to it, there's just not time. The other way that I don't really, it didn't really, I did, again, I didn't allow it to limit me that much. But I remember toward the end, we had farm Bethelites and they watched our farm. And I guess it was around the time that a new songbook came out, and plus we were studying the Revelation Climax book. And this one guy in particular, but all of them really, were always making comments about how the music that we get from God's organization is really all we need, and isn't this wonderful? And like anybody with any sense has to know that even if you love the Kingdom melodies, that's great. Go ahead. You have to know that there's something outside of there that's gonna, to be a well-rounded person and to, do that musically, you have to listen to some rock and roll and some symphonic music and even some rap. I mean, that's what's in the culture. But I just remember at this point when the songbook came out and the Revelation Climax book that it was like there's something wrong with me if I really think that Handel's Messiah compares to the Kingdom Melodies. And I'd be like, are you kidding me? That is some of the most incredible music ever written, and the Kingdom Melodies are what they are. I mean, let's face it, it's not exactly cerebral stuff. And so that was kind of limiting. But inside I'm still creative. I'm still thinking. I mean, I was trying to write my first opera actually I never did, but because it's a really big undertaking. But so I don't know. I did most of my recording when I was at JW. At first, it was really four JWs. I actually made three CDs that were by and for JWs.
Wow.
Yeah, and like on the third one, I had almost every song. I had a different guest singer that was always a fellow JW.
And JW,
Um,
they really have talented voices. The
oh
JW,
yeah, oh no,
JW
there's some.
music.
Well, look, when I was at Bethel, I mean, there were some really talented people. There was a guy in the service department that played a piece that was written for left hand on the piano by a
Oh,
guy that only had one hand. I don't know, in the 1800s or something. And he's playing it, and it was beautiful. It wasn't just like he's a poser, just reading the music and no emotion. I mean, it was really beautiful the way he played it. So there's talent there.
there's a
It's
lot
just
of
that
talent.
he did a beautiful job with that. But I can tell you that as a person that worked in the service department, that he had no time to really pursue the piano. So that's what I mean about how it didn't stifle
Yeah.
me, but it did.
Hmm.
Like I remember the first time I actually put an electric guitar on one of my songs, and this one guy said, he says, "Holy mackerel, Gary, does the circuit overseer know about this? Like, this is pretty wild, but it was stuff that I mean, he played guitar too, and we used to play together, and we played all of it. But so it limited me in that way. But at some point, I just said, I'm done with all this creative limitation stuff. I have time for it, and that's all I really lacked before. Really, was the time.
When you left the organization, how did playing music and basically your creativity help you reconnect with your true identity now that you
Yeah,
had more time?
yeah, great question. Well, first of all, it was very, very difficult because of what happened. It was probably the hardest part of my life when my marriage first manifested these issues, and I was basically kicked out of the marriage, and not divorced yet, but I was not in the house, and I didn't know where I was going, and lost all my money and my job and everything, and all my friends. I mean, I lost basically everything you can lose. So that was really difficult. But the way I dealt with it, I basically just said, okay, I'm still breathing, so until somebody shoots me, I can still do something. So let me think, what can I actually do today? What can I actually affect and have control over? It has to be something that I can actually make a difference. And then of all those things, which one is the most important? And I just attacked it one thing at a time. And I'm absolutely convinced that my ability to look at things in a rational way and to think out of the box, like, okay, what can I really do here? I'm absolutely convinced that because it has to do with cognitive dissonance and the way we respond to triggers. It's all the way our brains work and how our minds work, not just the brain itself, but the mind, how it works. And I'm convinced that it's because of music that I always am able to look at things in a kind of creative and rational, constructive way. So now that I had time, as you said, to connect with the music more, that definitely helped me a lot.
Yeah.
And to this day, it really helps me get through a lot of things. Not because it's a therapy or something, but just because of the way it massages your brain, and it makes that cognitive dissonance kind of more manageable.
Let's talk about your book called Force of Will.
Okay.
So, what inspired you to write it, and how did that process of telling some of your story help you heal after leaving the organization?
Okay. Well, what inspired me to write it was I was gaining friends left and right, not JWs. I didn't really tell them like even 10% of my story because I didn't want to. Again, I was in this mode where I didn't want to slander the organization. But the little bit I did tell them, people would be like, "Oh my God, this story's crazy, or you should write a book." And I don't know if they were kidding, but I kind of took it as like, "Yeah, but I'm not an author, so forget about that." But I think it was around 2015, something like that. One day, I just got this idea in my head based on a Woody Allen movie, which was a comedy. The way he told the story was having a bunch of comedians getting together at a at the Carnegie Deli or the New York Deli or whatever it was, and just tell one of the guys just telling the story. And I thought, wow, what if I actually had a therapist back in the day. What if I made him the narrator of the story? And then the whole thing opened up. I said, now I know how I'm going to tell it. So I just started from chapter one on, and it goes chronologically, sequentially. I mean, once in a while there's a what do they call a flashback, but I just went chronologically through the facts of the story from the day that my wife started the misinformation campaign till about 4 years later, right after I was disfellowshipped. I didn't intend it as therapeutic or cathartic. That wasn't the intent. I just thought, I want to write it because I'm creative. And I thought, it's my first time writing this kind of thing, like a whole novel, almost 400 pages or something, or 500. I forget how many. It wasn't intended for therapy, but it was, especially the way I wrote the thing about my judicial meetings, because I actually listened. I actually have recordings of those meetings. It's like 3 hours worth of material on CDs I've got. I probably still have them. I mean, I haven't listened to them in a really long time, but I pulled them out just to get my facts straight. But it's word for word what happened in those meetings, and it's like when I look back on it, I just had to laugh at how stupid the whole thing was. And I firmly believe that when you can finally look back on some traumatic experience and laugh about it, you're done. You're done. And I don't mean laughing like as a cover like a way of repressing the real feelings. I mean, it's genuinely funny. Like this is funny that these guys really think that they're that all that they actually have Holy Spirit and that their decision is a decision that's been made in heaven already. And it's like they really think that. That is funny as hell. It really is. And so I'm writing this and I'm like, I'm getting angry because I'm thinking, how they didn't listen. It was such a kangaroo court. But at some point, I'm like, this is hysterical. I mean, I must be writing a comedy thing here because it's ridiculous how these guys are so absurd. It's crazy. So in that way, and in other ways, yeah, it was therapeutic and cathartic. But like I said, that's not why I wrote it. But I did use the name Tam Swiftwater as the author because I didn't want legal trouble. Yeah,
Ooh.
and I've written books since then.
Yeah,
I don't think.
you have a play called Scapegoat.
Yeah, that's my latest, and that's the one I'm really, really anxious for people to read because, well, for one thing, I'll tell you that I originally wrote it as a screenplay for a movie because that's the way I saw it. I just thought like I'm not going to wait for somebody to read this and say I want to make it into a movie. I just made a movie out of it right from the gate. I think it's important because it for the whole community. Like I wasn't just writing for JWs at this point, or sorry, ex-JWs. I'm writing for anybody that cares about children. Anybody. If you're a grandparent or you're a parent or you're an aunt or an uncle of anybody, and you realize that my children are at risk because of the JW's positions on, well, not just the two witness rule, but mainly because of the fact that they don't report to authorities when they have a case. And that hasn't changed at all. They'll say it's changed, but it hasn't. So everybody's kids are at risk, and I think people need to know this. And I'm not going to write a happy ending where everybody gets together and everybody's happy. No, this is in the end, it really sends the message that this is going to continue as long as we allow it to. And so I wanted that message to be clear that, and I don't know if it's going to end up, destroying the JWs or the Watchtower. I don't really care whether it does or not, but I think it's important for people to realize what can happen because it is a fictional story, but it's based on what I know about how older bodies work and how these cases are handled or mishandled. And so I just think it's really important for people, for everybody to read it. Even your neighbors 3 doors down that never heard of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. Would you say that a lot of your creative work is inspired through your experience from the JW world?
Sometimes it is, but I think with this, it's I don't know. There's something in my head. I don't know what it is. Like I don't sit around looking for sparks. I don't. I did this when I was a teenager. I would like take pieces of Mozart sonata and like turn it upside down and try to play it just to get new ideas. And I finally realized, if an idea comes, it comes. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. Just do what you do. And with this particular thing, with the Scapegoat play, I was just going through the guide on the satellite TV we've got, and I noticed this movie from the 30s or something. I think the name of it is Confession, I think, but I'm not sure. I never watched the movie because I immediately said I have to make this into a modern story, and I don't want to know what the story's about. I don't want to know how it develops, how it ends. I don't want to know any of that because I want this story to be mine. It's just the idea that a Catholic priest in this movie hears confession from a criminal and then gets blamed for the crime and can't do anything about it because of the confessional confidentiality thing that priests have to honor. And I thought, wow, I can't think of anybody that applies more to than JW elders and how it affects the people in their care, so-called care. So I said, okay, let's make this about a congregation where somebody does something evil, bad, and then somehow he turns the tables and makes somebody else appear guilty, one of the people that are investigating him, who can't talk about it with anybody, can't report to the authorities. No, it's not anything graphic or really disturbing about, describing the actual behavior involving kids, but it just exposes like how it affects them, like the psychology. And that's how I'll just tell you this, that the way it becomes exposed, or at least not exposed, but the way it becomes, um, the way the mother becomes aware of it, and the way it works out in the end has everything to do with the way the child is acting, because kids act out things in strange ways. They don't really are not really made to deal with the kind of trauma that a CSA is going to put on them, and every kid comes up with a different way of dealing with it. I don't want to give away the ending, but that's why I wrote it. Was not like, oh, I want to expose the Watchtower. It was really just because I saw this blurb on the TV about a movie called Confession, and I thought, what if? And I always do that. I do that all the time. I watch Saturday Night Live, and I think, well, what if they did this scene a little differently? Maybe I'll write a comedy thing. So, it doesn't always work out to be something, but in this case, it did. I just said, what if this was a JW congregation in 2025 somewhere in the United States, and it kind of almost wrote itself.
Mm,
I
yeah.
just can't help it. It's like I can do one of two things. I could do it or not do it. To not do it is to suppress a creative process. I mean, sometimes you just say, well, yeah, I don't think that was going to work, or yeah, maybe I'll do it someday, or no, that's a bad idea. I'm not saying you gotta do everything creative thought that comes into your head, but when a really good one pops in there, it's like
Mhm.
you got to do it. You just have to
Yeah.
do it.
You right now, Gary, it sounds like you just have a lot of creative projects going for you right now. You
Mhm.
have a lot of creative projects that you're running. In the organization, you said one of the things that stopped you from really fulfilling a lot of your creativity was time.
Right.
And it's interesting because you left the organization in your 50s.
Mhm.
Would you say that time is still an issue for you?
Well, it always is an issue, I think, for everybody, but not as serious as 5 hours of meetings a week, field service Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and it's so the good thing about having creative projects, but like in terms of like turning Scapegoat into a book and then into a radio play that I actually recorded and you can actually watch it on YouTube. You just look up Scapegoat Gary Alt. um, it took a lot of times. I don't know how many weeks it took of like 10-hour days every day of the week getting that radio play together. So time is always an issue. It's just that it's not nearly the issue it was when I was in because one of the things cults do in different ways to different degrees, but one of the things they do is keep you busy, usually with nonsense. It doesn't matter what you're busy with. It could be productive or it could be nonsense. And with the JWs, it's mostly nonsense. Like when you look at the field ministry, how much of that time is actually well spent? I mean, it's a waste of time. And almost any JW would admit that if they're honest, that it's really, and I knew when I was in, it's really a waste of time. You'd say things like, well, we're out here proclaiming Jehovah's name. And that's all it means. That's all it's about. It doesn't matter who listens and how many people study the Bible. It's just that we're proclaiming his name. That's a way of justifying your complete waste of time. So yeah, I mean, but I don't think anything I do now is a waste of time.
You said earlier that elders are the most obedient followers. Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
yeah.
You think that played a really big role in your depression, in your mental health?
Yeah, I think so because your self-worth is dependent upon how much you obey.
Hmm.
But I don't know, somehow it's in some undefinable way you're being obedient for the sake of obedience and not for any real high principle. It's just because that's what you're supposed to do. But I actually went to this place called the Princeton Brain Bioclinic, I think. I don't know if it's still around, but they basically they take blood and urine samples and they diagnose you based mainly on those biometrics, not just on your conversation with them. I mean, it's all part of the whole big picture. But and they gave me, I don't know, Prozac or whatever it was, and that didn't work, so they changed it to whatever something else. And I tried St. John's Wort, and none of it made a bit of a difference. Their diagnosis had nothing to do with the biometrics. All it had to do with the fact that actually, I don't know if this was before or after the suicide, but it just had to do with the fact that I was expressing these negative thoughts. So when I left the organization, the negative thoughts eventually ceased. And guess what? I'm not clinically depressed. That was a
Right.
lot of nonsense. I mean, I'm not perfect. I mean, yeah, there's times when things get me, but it's like that the degree of the depression that actually led me to that point was just so unparalleled that it's like, what's the factor that was present there that's not present now? Oh, I know, it's that organization, you know.
And would you say being an ultimate follower in as a brother in the organization actually emasculates a person, a
Oh
man?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
How so?
Well, I'll tell you a specific example of how that did that. I mean, just everything we've already talked about. There was a bunch of situations with my kids, especially my one of my daughters, where the elders handled something while she was living with me. She's like 16 years old or something. She's living with us, and they handled it, and they never told me about it. Like my daughter's doing this thing, and I'm the parent. I'm so, I'm the parent. I mean, that's all I should have to say. I'm the parent. Period. And you're not telling me. And there was a time when they made an announcement from the service meeting about not about her, but about this thing that some kids are doing. And my wife and I went home in the car that night and looked at each other like, "Holy crap! Kids in our congregation are doing this. Can you believe it?" And it was a couple of days until we found out that, oh yeah, yeah, they are. In fact, your daughter's doing it. And it wasn't awful like, oh my god, the kid needs to be kicked out, but it was of concern to any parent. I found out who the two elders were that had talked to her, and I said, I want to talk to you guys. So we went into school B, And I laid it out. I said, this is what I found out is that you're talking to my daughter, which you have a right to do, but you're talking to her about things that I don't know about and making decisions based on that and giving talks to the congregation on it. Did you know that that's really not right? I mean, you have any clue what you're doing? You're basically, and I used the word emasculate in the meeting with them. I said, you're emasculating me. And then I went a step further and I started to describe like it's like you took a knife and my wife cut me off. She's like, Gary, let's stop. Okay, you made the point. I was like, okay, all right, but you're emasculating me because you're taking away my role as the man. But they're doing the same thing to my wife. It's just that at that point I didn't really express it that way. But they're basically taking away our role as parents because and the thing is that we used to do that to guys all the time, and that's one of the things I was always trying to be a leveling kind of a factor. Is that all the time we would have these quarterly elder meetings and we talk about ministerial servants and who's qualified to be elder, and or who's not a ministerial servant that maybe should be, and they oh my God, the number one disqualifying factor was he's not head of his house, including his wife. He's not the head of his wife or his kids because we found out about this or that. And a lot of times this was something really silly, like one of the kids missed a day of school and we didn't think it was appropriate. Like he wasn't really sick because we saw him out playing in the yard, stuff like that. And they'd say he's not the head of his house. Any problem in a household is blamed on the father every damn time. The only exception is where if the woman is a pioneer or wants to be a pioneer, so they have that leverage. They can say, well, we heard that your kid didn't go to school today. They would do that to the women that are pioneers or want to be pioneers because they can do it. It's the power that they have. Other than that, I had never ever ever seen one example where they sat a woman down and said, well, we know that your kid missed school and it wasn't appropriate. It's always so. What happens when one of the teenagers gets disfellowship? The guy loses his privileges. So I was always like, guys, all right, I know it does bring into question something about his fatherhood or his husbandship or whatever, if there is such a word. But let's be reasonable about it, and let's just be a little bit more controlled about ourselves. Um, and I think I was able to ameliorate some situations once in a while.
Looking back, would you do anything differently?
Well, that's a really good question. That um, I think it's an attitude or a philosophical question because we can't, of course, do things differently. To me, to say I'm going to do something differently would be like admitting that I wasted my time doing it the way I did it and that it had nothing but bad results. But I don't think it's ever possible to say that because, like, if I had to take the last 40 years and redo them, well, where would my kids be? Would they even have been born? I mean, they're great people, even though they don't talk to me at the moment. But they're great people. They're part of society. I can't say that any of it was a waste of time. And would I have done anything different? I mean, there are specific things that I wish I handled better. Like as an elder, there are certain times that I did something that I knew at the time was bad, or whatnot. Looking back on it now, I'm like, wow, that was really bad. I could give you a few examples if you want, but I wish I had done them differently because it affected people badly. But do I throw away the whole thing and say I should never been an elder? I should never been baptized? I don't know. I don't know. Um, I guess I wish I had. I guess I wish I had spent more time with the music back in the day when the music business was very, very different. It's always been difficult for my whole life, ever since the Beatles. They made it difficult because you can't because you no, I'm sorry, not the Beatles. It's it is the Beatles, yeah, because basically they set this precedent for record companies to hire bands that write their own material because it saves them a whole big process and a lot of money. Fact is, most bands don't know how to write songs, but the Beatles did it incredibly. So that's what we. So that changed the music business, and it's changed a little bit. And in recent years, it's changed hugely. I mean, just or bigly, as they say, right? So I kind of wish that I had got into it earlier to take advantage of the days when it was, I don't know, maybe a little more tenable. But I don't know what that would have meant. Would that mean I'd be a rock star now, or I don't know. I don't know if anything would have been different. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I just look at it like, yeah, I wish there were things I could have done differently. But no, I don't. I'm just glad I'm here now. And where I'm here is because of my past. And everything I am is because of my past. And I'm happy with who I am. So what part of my past should I regret? I don't really know.
And it sounds like what you're doing right now is in total alignment with Gary.
Right, right. Especially the life coaching, which is a kind of creative process in a way. I mean, I'm just listening to people and just confirming what I heard, asking a question to make sure I got it right. And I'm not giving advice. I'm not telling them what to do. I'm not condemning them or judging them. That's the way I've always been. I don't know if I always did it perfectly, but that's the way I've always been. And I've always known that since a teenager, that you should listen to people more than you talk. I mean, and I had experiences at work where I really saw that I just coached somebody, and I'm not educated, or I'm not certified to do it, but that's what I just did. So I should get certified. And I especially did that when I looked at the possibility that there might be millions of people leaving that JW organization any day now. Maybe, maybe not. But
Mhm.
we did see a lot leave during COVID, and I think it's going. I don't know. I don't keep track of it, but the typical JW has no idea once they leave or while they're leaving, they have no idea how to navigate the real world. No idea. They, because we were programmed for failure in every way, in terms of making friends, in terms of being financially viable, career wise, in every way, we were set for failure, completely dependent upon that organization. What's that expression? Learned dependency, or learned, I forget what the word is now.
Learn helplessness.
Learned helplessness. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, they're very much in the state of learned helplessness. So what are these people going to do? I can't imagine like a million people spread out all over the earth just walking around like zombies. Like, what the hell am I going to do? I don't have a friend, and I can't make one. I can't figure this out. And I thought, well, I can't help a million people, but I could be part of the solution for some people. So that's why I did the life coach thing, and it works. I mean, I mean, some of the people I've coached, maybe they would have found the answer somewhere else. I don't know, but they found it with me. That's or with my help. They found it themselves with my help. So that's why I do it. It's still a creative part of the creative process, listening to people, and and I did learn that as an elder. It's just that you don't get to do it that much as an elder, But I did. I remember I applied that in a couple of situations where I said to somebody, "What's most important to you, or what do you want to have happen in this situation?" And even if the situation is horrible, a woman's being beat by her husband, and it's a horrible situation, like, what do you want to have happen here? And it should be obvious that what she wants is for him to stop hitting her. But it's like, okay, but I mean, like, what do you want? What is the thing that you want to? So in other words, like, do you want to go back to him? Do you want to leave? And little by little, you're putting together a plan. It's like, it's not my idea. As an elder, I'm supposed to tell you, respect your husband and love him, and he'll love you back, which is obviously BS. But I'm not doing that. I'm just saying, what do you want to do? It sounds like what you just told me is you don't want him to hit you anymore. So what are the odds of that happening if you go back home? You tell me.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, you're right. So well, actually, you're right. You're right, because you just figured it out. Like, no, I shouldn't go back home. So that's what I did back then, completely in opposition to what the organization and the other guys that were with me would say. But I don't care, because I'm concerned about the person. And that's what I do now. It's like, you tell me what's important to you, and I'll see if I got it right.
Mm. You were a different elder back then.
Yeah.
Well,
But
you
like I
were a
said,
different, you were a different elder. Yeah.
yeah, but like I said, I did. There was times when I did. I mean, I just gave you one example of how I really screwed something up. Was when we had a judicial committee with someone who, according to the JW rules, it was right to do that. Not saying that it was right. That for some reason, I don't know why the conversation went this way, but I remember telling her, well, there are really two reasons why judicial committees meet with people. One is so that you can, manifest repentance and get back on track. The other is to keep the congregation clean. And the way she responded to that keep the congregation clean thing was like really bad. She just literally ran out of the kingdom hall, like not screaming, but very loudly, like complaining, and just darted out. And I thought, well, any elder is going to look at that and say, well, she has to be disfellowshipped because she's so belligerent. She's obviously not repentant. She just left the meeting. Well, that's what we did, unfortunately. But when I look back on it, why the hell did I say that to her? Why did I say we need to keep the congregation clean? Because I'm basically telling her that it's only going to be clean if you're out. That's an awful, awful thing to say to somebody. Awful. And that's what I did on that occasion. But there are times when I did something like that any other elder would do, and I realized in hindsight that was a really bad thing to do. So in a way, I was a typical elder, and in a way, atypical. I take responsibility for all of it, because even when you're being the atypical elder, because sometimes people do need to be disfellowshipped according to their attitude and according to the rules. But the way that arrangement works, the way shunning works, it's still wrong. Like because a woman or a man committed adultery, their kids shouldn't talk to them anymore, or their parents shouldn't talk to them anymore. I mean, that's. So even when you're right, you're wrong.
So, do you have any beliefs, limiting beliefs that you had to let go of, especially as a man in the organization, in order to truly be Gary and thrive?
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's probably something that I already knew was a belief that's incorrect. I kind of knew it already, but I didn't always behave like I knew it. And that is that men are supposed to have iron grip control of their emotions. I didn't really try to stuff emotions all the time, but after I left, I really learned much more deeply how important it is to experience emotions. Because what the typical male, not just ex-JW males, the typical male anywhere in the world does is that he said, like, if he has a problem that's, he's got depression as a result of it, he pretends it's not there. And he will not reach out for help. He won't talk about it with anybody. What I finally realized is that's not what being a man means. Being a man does not mean not talking about your issues with somebody, not recognizing it, not allowing the emotions to flow when they happen. I'm not saying stay sad for the rest of your life or be angry beyond reason and go out and hurt somebody as a result. I'm talking about just experiencing those emotions in a normal therapeutic healing way. That's not being a man, suppressing that stuff, because that's fear. If a man is suppressing his emotions and doesn't want to talk about it, he's giving into fear of not being a man, of not being masculine. That's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. That's put in our heads by society and by Watchtower especially, and it's just not true. If anything, I think you're not being a man by giving into the fear and allowing yourself to suppress those emotions and not looking for help, not talking to somebody about it. And I mean, I actually went through an EMDR, which I don't remember what that stands for. Look it up. EMDR, eye movement, something or other, because of a childhood memory I had way before I was a JW that was always, I always remembered it and it always bothered me. And I went through it, and for the first time, this is only like a couple of maybe 3 years ago, and all of a sudden I realized, like, wow. But I finally realized a better way of looking at it, like a better way of interpreting what happened, because I can't go back and know exactly what was going on when I was 6 or 7 years old, like why the adults did what they did, and there's no way. So I just realized from that wow, I finally got this figured out. And then what do I do about it? Like, what do I, you asked the question before, what would you like to have done different in the past, or what would you like to change or whatever? Well, I can't go back to that 6 or 7 year old boy and change anything. But if I could, I would just like to be in that same situation, in the same house with the same family, everybody the same way, just like they were. But I would just like to know what I know now, because then I would understand that it's not because it was my fault. It's not because nobody loves me, But you can't do that. But the point is that all these years later, I finally went through that exercise and confronted that emotion in a completely honest, naked way, transparent way. And I'm so glad I did that. I am so glad I did that, because it's just given me so much more power as a person. And it's like if I was still being the man that my dad never wanted to cry, I mean, he never wanted me to cry and got mad at me if I did. And I never could do that. I never could obey that rule, but I still always it was always in the back of my mind. And I finally processed it. And it has to do with that, letting go of that fear of, I'm a man. I can't do this. I can't face this emotion. I got to suppress it. And that's not exactly the thought process we go through. It was like, oh, I have to suppress this, but it is in fact what we do. We just refuse. I mean, how many men even stop on the side of the road and ask somebody for directions? We just don't do that, because it shows that we don't know what we're doing. And we have to know that we're in command all the time. It's baloney. It's absolute baloney. It's all fed to us by the organization, by society in general. Get over the fear. Be a man.
Gary, do you have any good experiences from the organization that you were able to apply in your creative work?
Oh, there's a couple of things, but the main one is that I was terrified. I would get zeros on English projects in English in high school, because I was so terrified of standing in front of the classroom giving a book report or something. I mean, you're talking about a dozen kids. I just refused to do it. And if I did do it because they forced me to, I would be like, my legs would be shaking so much I could barely stand. And I used to feel like when I was in band in high school, because I was a drummer, and so I was always standing up, and almost everybody in the band, the orchestra, is sitting down. So I'm just like exposed to the whole audience. And I used to feel like my head must be, I felt like my neck was turning to jello. So I was terrified, absolutely terrified of being in front of an audience. When I started associating with the JWs, even before I was baptized, I wanted to do everything they were doing. I wanted to go out in the field ministry. I wanted to do everything, including the theocratic ministry school. So that's terrifying. So I'm in school B. There's maybe a dozen people or 15 or something, and I'm giving this Bible reading, and like I aced it. I mean, I went 16,000 miles an hour. I did a 5 minute talk in about 2 minutes or something. But that definitely has helped me in terms of getting up in front of people, which has helped me in my creative work, but also in my business thing. Because I used to meet with customers all the time, or clients all the time. So maybe I would have got over it. I don't know. The fact is, I got over it because of the JWs, because of the theocratic ministry school. So I'm grateful for that.
Up next.
Tell my wife on a Monday or Tuesday that I want to separate. This isn't working. Friday, she tells me she's pregnant. The things I feared were worthy fears. I mean, it all happens.
Cults, they have a way of not just controlling the person, but controlling the person's entire life. How is that?
When you want to control people, you need 3 elements. And all cults have this element. You need fear. You need an enemy to fight against. And you need a...
So always remember, my friends, to own your story, own your power, and live your truth.